We had three
Okay. One more part of chapter 1, and then we're done with chapter 1, even though there were other aspects in it. But for time's sake, we're going to get through one more aspect of chapter 1. We don't need to have our computers up for this. So we can, yeah, this is pretty easy. So what I want to cover is communication contexts. And there's basically two umbrellas of communication contexts. The first one is called intrapersonal communication. So if we put, I don't have a marker, but we put the TRA, intrapersonal, and then the other one is interpersonal communication. So what's the difference between those two?
Interpersonal is like you're talking to people, and like interpersonal is like more to yourself.
Okay, so interpersonal is what anytime you involve another person. So intrapersonal, self-talk. Okay, talking to ourselves. How many of you talk to yourselves? Okay, you just did. I saw it. You didn't raise your hand, but you were like, no, I don't. So that's actually the most normal thing in the world. We tease each other if we're talking to ourselves. How many of you talk out loud? How many of you talk to your cat? I talk to okay, your dog? Okay. Okay, definitely. So those are actually forms of intrapersonal communication because let's face it, the only words that a dog knows are like biscuit or treat or outside or food or something or dinner or something like that. So they may know some commands, but really when we're saying, well, what do you think we should have for dinner? What do you think I should go out and have Chinese or, does your dog really know what you're talking about? You better. So talking to ourselves when we make sense of the world, this is also something that can influence the flow of communication. So what do we talk about? Yeah, anything and everything at all. But when we involve other people, that's interpersonal communication. There's a couple different ways we can do that, a couple different contexts. So one of those is casually with another person or maybe other people. You can consider some of the conversations that you've had here. They've been a little directed, and this may also go into group work. But if we take this work out of here, and we're talking about the pure socialness, out with a friend, okay, those conversations are very free-flowing. You can be yourself with your best friend, with a sibling. Okay, how many of you use a lot of slang? Okay. Okay, some of us don't, some of us do. So our own individual nature will come out in this type of conversation, and it's different for everybody. Okay, now let's move this to a different type of communication. Let's look at group work. You're going to have a group project in this class. Okay, or work. You're at work. You're working on a project with other coworkers, other colleagues. How does that type of conversation differ from the very relaxed type of conversation you have with somebody you know well?
I work in the healthcare field.
There
Pretty
is
much,
no difference.
yeah, there's
We
no
have no
difference.
shades.
None.
We have no shame.
It's very disturbing sometimes, actually.
Okay, but let's look at the purpose of it, though. Not the social aspect.
Okay.
So you can be friends and have a very relaxed style of communication with people from work. So a lot of those people are the same.
Quality finished product.
Good. Okay, so there's some type of goal in mind when we're talking about work type communication. So that group work type of communication, usually it's a group of people and they're meeting regularly. How many of you meet every morning with a group when you go to work? Okay.
It's like quarterly.
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 Okay, that's another type of engaging in that group work. So it's, there's going to be times that you're going to be meeting and maybe you're reporting what you're doing.
Yeah, or we like talk about like different kids, or like we talk about like what we're doing and like how we're solving a problem. Like so we are all on the same page. So like one kid can't get away with certain things with another teacher.
Yep, absolutely. So here we have a different way of communicating. That doesn't mean that you can't have some relaxed type of communication with some of your peers. Maybe some you can't. So we can look at that. There might be a distinction. So you're working towards a goal. You probably meet at some type of regularity. Now with group work, for example, like something like this, 5 to 7 is the perfect size. Now you can have groups as large as 15 if you have somebody that can strongly facilitate it. If it gets bigger than that, then you have little subgroups. So those are the ideal conditions. And a lot of times with group work, there's an end in sight. There's a goal reached somehow. Doesn't mean you won't have new goals, but that's how we're defining group work. So there's a little bit more formality to it, although it can be very casual. And then the big one, public speaking. What is public speaking like? How is it different from those other two that I just described?
Strangers, people you don't know.
Okay, so you can have a very diverse audience. Now you could have an audience where you know the people very well. So let's say that you have a following and you know people pretty well. But generally, when we're looking at public speaking,
Very formative.
Yeah, it's talking about something that maybe somebody else doesn't know about, something saying.
Or what you want to know.
very good. So, say that again? Okay, and that's the way your book describes it. Now you can have open forums like this class does, so it's just a style of public speaking that I prefer. So as we're looking at the formality, let's say that you have a very diverse group, more diverse than this. Okay, what types of things would you recommend to a public speaker? Let's say there's 100 people here. All different groups, ethnicities, cultures are coming together. What would you recommend?
Staying away from like slang.
Okay, so you have to clean up some of that. So if you're very comfortable with it, there's nothing wrong with slang. How many of you cuss in your everyday lives? Okay, not everybody raised their hand. So one of the things that you have to be careful is that you know your audience, and if that's not going to work for your audience, or if you're not sure, you want to clean that up. So slang, being formal in your speech, and also speaking in a way that the entire audience can understand. There's nothing more irritating than somebody that's trying to use all these fancy words like that. They don't want to sit over there and look up everything. It's not fun. So you really have to be careful in public speaking that you're speaking to your audience, that you understand your audience. The purpose of communication is to be understood. And once you lose that, or if you start excluding people, because you're telling jokes that others don't get, or don't understand, or don't appreciate, that's not working for you anymore. So public speaking is another type of communication context, which is something that we'll focus on in this class a lot. You're going to get good at this. And then to add on to that, of course your book talks about these communication contexts, but they don't talk about everything because it would take forever to talk about all the different types of communication contexts. But there is something to say about how technology has changed our communication context. The way we can reach the masses with technology is amazing. So that in itself changes how we communicate with others. So public communication, public speaking has expanded. So if you're talking about YouTube channels, maybe you have a focused group, you know, and you can speak in a certain way. But if you want to reach those wider audiences, then you have to still be aware of those rules that we have. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Now, being that you were so awesome and you had all of this together, when I walked in, you actually saved time, so we're done early.
You guys were on.
I appreciate